The woods were cracking into the fire. A few years back, someone had told him the same thing Waybrock said to Ellie. The person who told him that was no longer alive, but Ellie reminded him of that person. He sat there silently, thinking about that one person. Ellie was about to leave. She was worried they might scold her for staying out too long. Before leaving, Ellie said she was allowing him to have the arrow for that day only. He could repay by playing with his friends and with her after that day. She asked him if he would come to meet her again. He agreed to meet her and asked where he should find her. She said in the castle. He was shocked to hear about the castle. She smiled, but she smirked from inside. She ran from there, saying she would meet him tomorrow, but he wanted to stop her. She ran away, and he stood there silently. Waybrock thought Ellie was a maid at the castle. He held the arrow in his hands and thought that the night would be long. He was totally exhausted. He stayed up all night looking at the arrow. He wanted to take a look at the ore the arrow was made of. Waybrock was heading towards the castle. He thought nobody wanted to work with him as he hadn't picked up the hammer in 10 years. He came close to the castle, thinking about the last time he was this close to the castle. He was afraid to face his grace as well. He was also worried about smelling like alcohol in front of the kids. The gatekeepers asked Waybrock what he was there for. They asked again what was in his hands. He was holding an arrow. The gatekeepers were about to take out their swords and wanted him to identify himself. As he was about to say something, he realized that only a few people from the castle would recognize him. He didn't understand how he should explain everything to them. Someone opened the gate and said it was natural that the gatekeepers didn't recognize him because he had been gone for a long time. It was Lady Amanta. The gatekeepers asked her if she knew Waybrock. She said she did know that man well. She saw him and said, "It's been so long, Waybrock." He thanked Lady Amanta for helping him back there. Lady Amanta explained to him that no one would welcome him with open hands with an arrow in his hands. She told him to go inside a room with her as Miss Ellie was waiting for him. He didn't understand who Miss Ellie was. Then he realized that the child he met yesterday was no servant. Miss Ellie, along with Damien and Lord Amanta, were all sitting there. Ellie greeted him again as he entered. Ellie greeted Lady Amanta as well. Waybrock didn't understand why Lord Amanta was there. Even Lord Amanta didn't understand why Waybrock was there. Ellie said she wanted to introduce them both to each other. She said Waybrock was her friend, and he was more interested in weaponry. She added that the arrow Lord Amanta gave to Ellie, Waybrock liked that arrow and she wanted to have a conversation between Lord Amanta and Waybrock as they both were into weaponry. Lord Amanta didn't understand how the two met. Ellie asked Waybrock to sit there and talk. Baron Amanta understood that it was Ellie who called Waybrock and Vieira went out to take him inside. Waybrock said yes because the guards didn't let him in. The Baron looked at Ellie. Ellie understood that the Baron was suspecting her. She suddenly changed the subject and asked about the arrow to Waybrock. Waybrock said he looked at the arrow very closely, and he wanted to apologize to her for yesterday. He didn't know she was related to Lord Damien. Ellie didn't mind at all about his behavior. The Baron asked him, now that he had looked at the arrow, what did he find? Waybrock said he was stunned. How did the Baron have the idea of making an arrow out of a monster? The Baron started explaining. Ellie smirked again because everything was according to her plan. Damien thought she was smiling because she likes cocoa. He gave her his cocoa. She asked him why he wasn't eating, and he said he wanted to give it to her. The Baron said that a sword would be better than an arrow, and he knew that Waybrock would say that to him. He further asked him if he wanted to make one sword with Amanta. The Baron said that with their talent, they could create something incredible. From that, the Baron understood that Waybrock's eyes were not fully healed. He asked why Waybrock was still refusing treatment. Waybrock didn't understand why he said that. He said that he had been treating himself for quite a long time. The Baron was shocked too. Waybrock further added that Dr. De'Aaron even gave him medicines. As Waybrock mentioned the doctor, he remembered that he didn't take the medicine that day. But for some reason, he was seeing everything clearer than usual days. Waybrock understood that the medicine could be something bad for his eyes. He asked Baron Amanta a favor. Ellie came there as well. Auntie, standing near his grace, said that every vassal house there should start giving their reports to his grace. The doctor looked at his grace, thinking that if Ellie and Damien got married, it could create a conflict within the imperial family. This might lead to the end of Duke Schuitz's house. Even if they seized control of weapons, they would still be in trouble. He was hoping that Viscount Quinter might have a plan for that. Duke Schuitz was sitting there with a glass bottle in his hand. The bottle had 2 medicines inside it. He remembered that Ellie had come to him to give him the medicine. Auntie didn't understand what those pills were because his grace was in a good mood the whole day. His grace said to begin. Viscount Quinter said he wanted to give his report from his territory. He showed a sword to his grace. He said it was not a bad sword and asked for the next Viscount. Viscount Quinter had produced a new weapon that was far better than anyone else's. Unlike their previous works, this sword was much lighter and easier to handle. Viscount Quinter unwrapped the sword from the cloths and presented it to his grace. He came to Duke Schewitz and held the sword in both palms. Viscount Quinter knew that only Weybrock used to produce blades for the Duke in the past. But if the Duchy of Schewitz did not deal with the rampant monsters, they would suffer huge damage. With that, they might have no choice but to use Viscount Quinter's blade. His grace didn't say anything. He asked Baron Amanta how his mine was doing with the newly discovered ore. Baron Amanta said everything was as always, good. His grace wanted to know what that meant. Viscount Quinter said he had heard Baron Amanta couldn't produce more than just an arrow. He also pointed out that the Black Lions and all the Schewitz houses used blades rather than arrows. Viscount Quinter taunted Baron Amanta, saying that arrows have no place but can be used for content purposes. Baron Amanta looked at him very silently. His grace was still holding the medicines. He paused and asked the doctor how Weybrock's condition was. The doctor and Viscount Quinter looked at each other. The doctor started saying that Weybrock was still refusing treatment for his condition. He further added that it might be due to some psychological factors causing him not to take the medicine. His grace understood very clearly. His grace took the sword Viscount Quinter was holding. He looked at the tip of it and said it was indeed light. Viscount Quinter got excited, thinking the Duke had finally accepted his sword. As the Duke was examining the sword, someone knocked on the door. Viscount Quinter didn't like that someone interrupted their meeting while his grace was looking at the sword. His grace let the person come in. The maid apologized for causing a disturbance in the meeting. She asked if Dr. D'Aaron was there. Dr. D'Aaron stood up. The maid said that Ellie was in deep pain due to the eye drops he had given her. The doctor asked what had happened to her. He said he had not given her any medicine before there could be a misunderstanding. She showed the eye drops he had given to Weybrock and asked if he had given this eye drop to her. D'Aaron saw the medicine and was shocked to see it was the same medicine he had given to Weybrock. It was a liquid made from cursed lake water to cause blindness in Weybrock's good eye. He didn't understand why Ellie was using it. He realized that if Ellie, who was to be Damien's wife, went blind, his grace might have him executed. He took his bag and asked where she was, saying it was dangerous. The maid said she was told it was clearly a medicine. The doctor yelled at her, saying, "Who would tell you that nonsense? It was poison." He rushed and said he needed to examine her condition quickly. He asked again where she was. Weybrock came directly in front of him. The doctor asked why Weybrock was there. Weybrock said the medicine was fake. The doctor got very scared. Weybrock understood that the medicine he received was poison. People sitting there asked the doctor why he had given fake medicine to Weybrock, and someone asked how Weybrock's eyes were doing. The doctor understood that all this would fall on him and he would die alone there. The doctor got scared and told everyone he was just following orders from Viscount Quinter. It was Viscount Quinter who told him to do it. Viscount Quinter got scared and said he didn't know anything about that. The doctor said it was Viscount Quinter who wanted to kill Weybrock to weaken the military in the north. Viscount Quinter said the doctor was trying to blame him for the doctor's evil actions. The doctor said he had proof. He took out a ball from his pocket and started playing the recording. It was the conversation from the previous day where Viscount Quinter was talking about killing Weybrock and taking over the weaponry. Viscount Quinter was shocked to see that D'Aaron had recorded their conversation. His grace said, "How amusing." He thought that the child was the cunning rat planning against him, but the person planning was so close to his grace. His grace took the sword in his hands. The sword had a flaming blaze coming from his grace's aura. His grace, with no emotion on his face, directly looked at Viscount Quinter. Those were the eyes of a murderer whose madness is quelled only when he spills blood. Viscount Quinter was shaking, seeing his grace standing in front of him. His grace used the Viscount's sword and pointed it towards the Viscount, saying he was right about the sword. It was lighter and easy to hold. If it is lighter, then it is easy to cut with the sword as well. His grace's eyes were looking directly into the Viscount's eyes, and he noticed that his grace's eyes were furious. If his grace lost his temper, it would be a big loss for them. And he noticed that Weybrock came forward. He presented his sword after 10 years to his grace. Weybrock thought that his grace would not accept his sword as he hadn't been able to use a hammer in 10 years. His grace said it had been a long time since a mere counterfeit had felt the same. His grace dropped the Viscount's sword and took Weybrock's sword. From the moment his grace held the sword, he was ready to use it in front of everyone. The Viscount was on the floor. Everyone started to leave the meeting room. His grace shed blood on the floor. Even though his grace accepted Weybrock's sword, Weybrock still doubted that his grace would forgive him for the time he was gone. His grace asked how long he needed to wait. Weybrock didn't understand. His Grace asked Waybrock how many times he needed to produce more swords. His Grace's knights needed his sword, and they also needed time to get used to it. Duke Shuitz wanted Waybrock to do it quickly. Waybrock was flattered. He promised to bring the sword as soon as possible to His Grace. His Grace nodded to him while Auntie was dragging away the Viscount's body. Auntie was happy that everything between His Grace and Waybrock had worked out. Even Duke Shuitz felt better after shedding some blood, but His Grace's aura was still blazing, perhaps because he hadn't calmed down yet. His Grace turned his head directly towards Auntie, and Auntie was shocked. His Grace started going out, and Auntie asked where he was going. Auntie tried to stop him, but His Grace was in a hurry. He burst through the door. Ellie was reading a book in that room. His Grace ran into her and looked directly into her eyes. He started shaking her, asking what had happened to her eyes. He had heard that she used some sort of eye drops that caused her blindness. His Grace was making Ellie dizzy. His Grace stopped. She was worried that His Grace might have found out that she lied about her eye illness. His Grace's clothes were covered in blood, and she understood that things had turned out well. But she thought maybe she should have gone there and acted like she actually dropped something into her eyes. Roina saw His Grace there and was worried. She didn't know His Grace was visiting Ellie and hadn't prepared anything for his arrival. Auntie rushed there too, asking His Grace why he was in such a hurry without saying a word. Auntie noticed that His Grace was standing close to Ellie. He came directly to His Grace and said he needed to go outside quickly, but His Grace denied. His Grace looked at Ellie and made sure she was fine. Auntie and His Grace came out. Auntie felt disappointed. His Grace asked what was with the disappointment. Auntie asked how come he did not understand. If His Grace knew, why would he have asked Auntie? Auntie gave a handkerchief to His Grace and said to wipe off the blood from his clothes. His Grace asked why. Auntie said for Miss Ellie, wipe off the blood. Auntie explained that His Grace was familiar with bloodshed, but the same did not go for Ellie as she was still young. He said that Ellie could have gotten scared if he went with blood on his hands. Even other children would have been shocked if they saw him covered in blood. A maid came from inside and said His Grace had dropped a bottle. It was the glass bottle with medicine inside it. The maid said that she was the one who gave the medicine to Ellie when she said she had a headache. She must have given those to His Grace. Auntie said if he were in His Grace's place, he would have taken the pills. He said taking medicine wasn't a problem if he was sick and ill-tempered. His Grace snatched the handkerchief from Auntie. His Grace looked at the handkerchief and imagined Ellie. His Grace asked if other knights also carried handkerchiefs with them or not. Auntie said they didn't usually carry one. His Grace ordered Auntie to provide handkerchiefs to each knight because who knows when they'll have to clean their blood. His Grace wiped his hands. He thought any fabric would be best but then started thinking about something. He thought if the towel gets rough and Ellie gets a scratch because of it, then it would be wrong. So he added that the fabric should be soft. He ordered that Ellie choose the fabric. There could be a moment when Ellie may ask for a handkerchief from the knights, so they better choose a nice pattern as well. His Grace also ordered Roina to tell the other maids to get ready with sewing as His Grace wanted them to make flowers on the scarves. He made Auntie the in charge of the distribution of handkerchiefs to knights. Auntie and Roina were both speechless with the actions of His Grace. Then His Grace walked out of there. Auntie didn't understand what happened to His Grace all of a sudden. The carriage stopped somewhere. Lord Damien and Ellie have arrived in the market, the maid said. Ellie and Damien were both fascinated by seeing so many people there. It was the Pelline district in the duchy. Ellie got out of the carriage. She noticed that the market was full of people, some buying and some selling goods. The maid was concerned that Ellie didn't go to the Schuetz family shop but rather came to the public market. It was the first time His Grace had allowed her to go out of the castle. Ellie liked the market a lot and said it was all fine for her. She wanted to talk with market merchants and gather information, as she would need to start a business after running away from the mansion. This was her opportunity to get information from the local market people. They began to look for clothes. Ellie held Damien's hand tightly because there were so many people, and she didn't want him to get lost again. Damien was worried that Ellie might let go of his hand in the crowded place. Ellie reassured him that if he wanted, she could hold his hand too. Ellie understood that Damien was scared because of the crowd. Damien asked her again if she wouldn't let go of his hand, and she agreed. They started to browse the shops. They came across a shop selling weapons at a cheaper price. Ellie saw and understood that many things in the north were sold to deal with monsters. Ellie and Damien bought something to eat and were eating it near the carriage. Ellie noticed that Damien had sauce on his face. Damien didn't seem to notice. She was worried about how to wipe the sauce from his face. The knight standing behind her handed her a handkerchief. Ellie thanked him. It was Sir Raynor, who was also into fancy things. She wiped the sauce from Damien's face. Ellie had seen everything and wanted to know more about the products in detail. A man sitting there with products asked if Ellie was interested. Ellie said yes, as those items were unique to her. The shopkeeper smirked and said they were highly pricey, so he was stopping her. If she had that kind of money, only then could she have a look. Suddenly, he stopped talking as Sir Rainer and the maids arrived. Ellie wanted to have a look at those things. She asked what was in the bottles. The shopkeeper said they were healing potions. He got so scared he allowed Ellie to have a free look around the shop. He said that those healing potions treated light bruises, but visiting a priest might be more effective. Ellie found that those potions were too costly for a minor effect, and going to the temple would be much better to help with the Duke's madness. Even if they couldn't cure his grace, poor people used to buy those healing potions as they were not rich enough to hire a priest with divine power. The maid took a step and asked why Ellie was interested in healing potions if she wasn't hurt. Ellie told her she was planning to give those healing potions to his grace when he lost his temper. The maid advised her to buy one and gift it to his grace. In the duchy, it was a tradition that when kids go out for the first time, they buy gifts for their family. Ellie thought about giving him a gift but remembered that he didn't take the medicines she gave him. He might get angry and say, "How dare she give me a gift anyway?" She thought he wouldn't like it. She passed on the healing potion and said she might look for something else. The maid agreed. At an earring shop, Ellie saw some earrings she liked. The shopkeepers insisted she try one if she liked. A few gems in the earrings were totally like Damien's eyes. Damien was looking at something and thought it would look good on Ellie. She bought one of the earrings from the shop. As she finished shopping, she asked her maids to head out. But those maids were jealous. She understood that they wanted her to buy gifts for them as well. Ellie understood that her relationship with the maids was because of Duke Schewitz. But they were really nice to Ellie, so she thought maybe to show her gratitude she should gift something to them. She was concerned about her choice for them. She didn't understand what if they didn't like it and hated it. Suddenly, the crowd started to gather. The shopkeeper announced that it was free to look and not expensive to buy. People started praising the earrings the shopkeeper had. Ellie noticed that the shop was getting crowded all of a sudden. She noticed a boy there doing something. He stole an earring. She asked Damien if they could look around other shops. She understood how Duke Schewitz felt when she slipped the gem into the Viscount's coat earlier. She tried to ignore the boy because it was not her concern. But she could be doing business someday and couldn't let crimes go unnoticed. She grabbed his hand and asked what he was doing. The boy asked who she was. She said she saw him stealing from there. His parents couldn't believe what she was saying. She understood that this was it. She could give her first gift to Duke Schewitz. His parents apologized and said he was just a young boy and they didn't know about that. Sir Rainer looked directly at the kid without any expression. The man got scared and started scolding his son, saying why did he steal and didn't apologize. The man apologized to Sir Rainer and said he was looking after the kid, but the kid still seemed to stick his fingers here and there. The man was ready to give the child for execution or to be held as a slave for his deeds. Those were the consequences, after all, he said. The kid got scared and said the man made him do it. The man had taken something from the kid and in return for bread. He wanted the kid to steal the earrings, the kid said. The man said the kid was totally lying and called him a liar. The man slapped the kid so hard that the kid fell to the ground. Ellie got angry. She could not believe how someone could do that to a child. Ellie understood that they were not his real parents and they were using him for their selfishness. Ellie yelled at him, saying he committed a crime by hitting a child he barely even knew. The man pushed Ellie and wanted her to stop running her mouth. Everyone got concerned about Ellie and asked if she needed a physician. The maids and Damien looked at the man with anger in their eyes. The man and the woman standing there understood that they had made a mistake. They started running, and Sir Rainer started chasing them. Ellie was not hurt and asked Damien to help her get up. She saw that the boy was still sitting on the ground. He looked at Ellie with anger. Ellie gave him the bracelet. The boy didn't understand how she took it out of his pocket. Ellie saw him putting his hand in the man's pocket, trying to take something from him. She understood that the man took his bracelet and that's why he was helping the man. Ellie told him not to steal again. The kid thanked Ellie as the bracelet was the only thing left behind by his parents. He offered to repay her someday. Ellie asked if he needed something to eat. She bought him bread and milk for him and his siblings. He told Ellie that he lived in an orphanage and if she needed help, she could find him there. Ellie understood that he was mature enough to have a sense of humor. He introduced himself as Grace. It turned out that the boy was actually a girl. She recognized her as the main character from the storybook. Grace was a holy knight. She risked her life to protect the female lead. Ellie was looking at Grace's face. Ellie found her very handsome. She remembered that the book mentioned Grace being a woman, but she didn't expect this. Grace thought there was something on her face, so she asked Ellie. Ellie told her that her face was handsome. Grace even said that Ellie was pretty as well. Grace didn't understand whether to thank Damien or not. Damien was shy around Grace due to his hard life. Sir Raynor arrived, having caught both thieves. Ellie was relieved to know that Sir Raynor caught them both. The maids were still concerned about Ellie because she had fallen and might have gotten hurt. One of the maids brought her medicine as she didn't know where Ellie was hurt exactly. Ellie was stunned that her maids managed to arrange medicine for her while she was talking to Grace. Ellie assured them that she was okay. The maids were glad to hear that. The maid said if they were both okay, it was good to go back to the carriage. It was not safe for Ellie to walk there alone. She asked Sir Raynor to help them. Sir Raynor took them both by the hand. The maid instructed to take the two thieves in another carriage. Ellie hadn't finished her shopping yet and they were going back home. She asked Ivana, Ashel, and May that she hadn't seen the entire market and wanted to look around a bit more. She said she would stick with Sir Raynor and if she felt low, she would come back to the carriage. The maids agreed to her request and went to get the other knights together. Grace understood that Ellie was from a noble family and felt a bit jealous of her. Ellie said goodbye to Grace and gave her some medicine. She was worried about her future as she planned to run away and wanted Grace to protect Damien. Grace just stood there, not understanding anything. In the castle, Waybrock and Baron came with a sword to present to His Grace. They gave a new sword to His Grace. His Grace was glad that Waybrock's skills hadn't rusted a bit. As he picked up the sword, someone knocked on the door. It was Ellie and Damien to greet His Grace. Both Waybrock and Baron greeted Ellie and Lord Damien. They knew about Ellie's first outing. Ellie explained how they saw so many things and enjoyed their time. Ellie told them how fascinating it was for her to watch people with quick hands, but they were sloppy. It was silent there. Suddenly, Auntie changed the topic in a hurry. Ellie showed them the earrings she bought. Auntie knew that His Grace did not have his ears pierced, yet he might not mind taking a gift. The earrings were pretty, Auntie said, and she gave them to Damien. She didn't know she bought them for him. She thought they would look good on Damien. Auntie was shocked, and His Grace froze. Even Damien had a gift for Ellie. It was a necklace. It was pretty and Ellie liked it. They both bought something for each other. Ellie wanted him to try the earrings. Baron thought they were closer than they had thought. His Grace grabbed the handle. Auntie was worried, so he ran to Ellie and asked if she bought something for His Grace. She did have a present for His Grace as well. She called Sir Raynor. Sir Raynor was able to track down the pickpocket group operating in the duchy. Sir Raynor further explained that Miss Ellie was able to identify them. Ellie was lucky, and this was a gift to His Grace. Auntie was shocked because this was an incredible present. Baron was jealous of Ellie. Both Baron and Waybrock looked at His Grace, who was shocked, not saying a word. Auntie understood that His Grace wanted only a small thing from her. Ellie wiped Damien's head. Ellie asked how Damien's day was. Damien was happy to be with Ellie all day and was able to buy a gift for her. Ellie was happy for the gift as well. For Ellie, Damien was pretty, but he wanted to be handsome, not pretty, just like Grace. It seemed like Ellie's compliment for Grace bothered Damien. Damien was already showing his new feelings about his appearance. Ellie told him that being handsome is good and according to her, Duke Schewitz was the most handsome. Damien got sad. He was worried that Ellie liked only handsome guys, not pretty ones. So she consoled him, saying pretty guys are the best and she likes them a lot, and Damien is pretty with handsome. Somehow, she managed to make him happy again. Ellie was very tired because raising a child isn't easy at all. Damien thought maybe Ellie was hurt or something. She said she was faking it. Damien didn't understand why she faked. She told him that faking is much better than being fooled by others. She faked it so they could catch the bad guy. She told Damien that if there's anything he wants, he should not give up on it, but he should not do anything immoral or unethical. If he gives everything to get what he wants, he'll surely get it, she said to him. According to the novel, there are two rival lovers of Damien. They were Prince Fabian and Prince Matteo. They will cause Damien an incredible amount of pain and suffering. So that's why she was trying to help Damien to get a happier life after all. Damien slept beside Ellie, mumbling that he wants to stay with Ellie. An arrow was shot by Ellie. She was practicing her archery with Baroness Amanta, who mentioned that Ellie's skills were improving. Baroness Amanta said that Ellie was talented, which made Ellie feel shy. Ellie never knew that Lord Amanta would give her a present. Upon that, Baroness Amanta said Ellie was going to be her family member, so it was nothing. As soon as Ellie heard family, she remembered how in her past everyone treated her badly. She didn't want to think much about it, as she didn't want to set her expectations high because she was not going to be their real family member. Everyone was just following the Duke's order to adopt Ellie. She didn't want to be part of their family. The Duke only adopted her because he thought Ellie might be of some use. She thought to do her best. Baroness Amanta didn't understand what Ellie was talking about doing her best for. Ellie didn't want to cause any inconveniences to Lord Amanta, her, and Sir Jarrett in their house. Baroness Amanta told her that being family doesn't always have to be blood-related. Love and taking care of someone you love also come under the definition of family. She quoted something that being born into this world alone is enough for those around you. Ellie did not need to push herself for anything. She was more than enough as she was. Ellie was glad because no one had ever told her that before. At that moment, Sir Jarrett arrived. He called for Ellie. Ellie greeted him. Sir Jarrett was also practicing his archery. What a coincidence it was. Ellie thought he might have come to ask about the bow. She gave feedback that the bow was wonderful and comfortable for her. She was happy with the bow. It was a relief for him that Ellie liked it. He made sure to craft something that Ellie would like. He insisted on helping Ellie and teaching her how to shoot an arrow. Ellie agreed to that. He started demonstrating how to shoot an arrow. Baroness Amanta hadn't seen her son happy for so long. She teased him, saying that if she knew, she would have given him a younger sister. Ellie pretended she didn't hear anything. She changed the subject, saying that Waybrock was making a sword these days. Waybrock had to make thousands of swords, but he had to do it alone, which was totally impossible for him. Everyone was giving their best to make everything possible faster. Jarrett asked Ellie if she was ready to shoot again. As Jarrett was teaching her how to shoot, she understood that Waybrock had to deal with monsters to make a sword. And yet, he was alone. It would be good to find him an assistant. Nobody ever thought of giving him an assistant. Ellie wasn't paying attention and shot her arrow too high. She went to get the arrow. She found the arrow and was glad it didn't go too far. A shadow appeared. She didn't understand what it was. Suddenly, rain clouds came out of nowhere and crows started flying. She was scared and didn't understand what was going on. She held her arrow tightly. The crows weren't flying away, rather they were coming after Ellie. Someone might have done this to set her up. A crow came down. It was bigger than Ellie thought. She was shocked to see such a big crow. Ellie was shaking and told the crow not to come near her. She didn't understand why the crow was cawing. It was as if the crow understood her perfectly. The crow opened its big wings, and a man appeared out of nowhere. Ellie couldn't believe her eyes that a crow had turned into a human. What kind of crow was that? The man recognized Ellie as the child from the lake. He asked if she was close with that hammer. She didn't understand what hammer he was talking about. More crow people came. They heard that she had treated his eye sickness. They were talking about Waybrock. Ellie thought they might be angry that she helped Waybrock with his eye problem. They might be his enemy. It turned out that Ellie had saved their master. Ellie was absolutely blindsided. The crows knew from the start that she would treat their master's eyes the moment she arrived at the castle. They were able to read people's faces. They were fascinated by the arrow Waybrock made. Ellie still didn't understand what they were talking about. She didn't understand why they were calling Waybrock their master. She noticed that those crowmen were touching the arrow with their bare hands, and it was not causing them any harm. She smiled and found something intriguing. Ellie understood that she could use them as assistants for Waybrock. She smiled, realizing she could help Jarrett and Waybrock. As she was asking for their help, Jarrett arrived and asked who those men were. He ordered them to leave Miss Ellie alone. Jarrett was worried about Ellie being alone and guarded her. Jarrett didn't understand how they came to the Duchy of Schwitz and went after Ellie. The crowman understood that Sir Jarrett mistook him and apologized for his behavior. They explained that they were there to thank Ellie for what she did. Ellie didn't understand what she did. They explained that meeting her was their only intention from the start. They said not to be afraid of anything. They only wanted raw talent to help them make the strongest weapon in the world. Ellie didn't understand why a clan would be dedicated to weaponry to make the strongest weapon. Their clan was mentioned in history. In the past, their clan made a weapon used by the imperial family. The sword contained strong divine power in their clan's mana. The sword was so strong that it could destroy evil beings. Maybe those crowmen belonged to that clan, Ellie thought. Their leader had died, and ever since, they had not been able to make the strongest weapons. They saw Hammer's sword, loved Waybrock's sword, and wanted him to be their clan's new master. But all of a sudden, Waybrock locked himself in his house and stopped making those weapons. After Ellie came and saved his eyesight, he could make new swords again. For the crowmen, Ellie was a savior. Ellie stared at them in disbelief. She liked it but didn't understand what was going on. She realized that if they considered her their savior, they would take her and Waybrock's opinion seriously. It wouldn't be hard to ask them to work with Waybrock. She asked if Waybrock knew about their clan. Waybrock didn't know about their clan, only they knew him. But they were ready to be taught by Waybrock and make him their master. She was shocked to hear that. She asked them if they wanted to repay her. Jarrett interrupted Ellie and asked if she understood what they were saying. Ellie didn't understand what he meant. She said she could totally understand them. Jarrett looked at her with a strange expression. She realized she was the only one who could understand them. The According to Talum, the Crow Man, a person who belongs to a mystical tribe and lived near the world tree, could understand non-human languages. It was because the blood had been transferred from ancestors to generations. When she thought about it, she remembered something from the book story. It was said that only members of the imperial family could talk to animals. She was just an ordinary kid but wondered if she might belong to the imperial family or live near the mystical tribe. She understood everything. Jared asked what happened to her. She understood why Sir Jared didn't understand anything when Talum was talking to her. It must have sounded weird when they were talking. She didn't know the reason, but she might have some strange skills that helped her understand. She asked Talum if he could speak to all humans. He said he could understand humans well, but when it came to talking and expressing emotions, they were not good at it. They often got into sticky situations because of that. Ellie smiled and said she knew a way they could repay her and learn from their master. She took them to Waybrock. She said if it looked like she was blackmailing him, then he should wave his hammer. Waybrock waved his hammer. Waybrock thought she was mocking him. Jared introduced them as Ellie's new friends. It was hard for Waybrock to make swords alone, so Ellie brought them there. She told him that they liked making weapons and introduced Talum, saying that Talum wanted to work under Waybrock. Talum suddenly got close to Waybrock because he was ready to be his assistant. Everyone there started yelling, "Master's apprentice." She explained how Talum's clan makes amazing and strong weapons and it was their fate. They were ready to forge swords with Waybrock, but they could not speak much of their language, although they could understand it very well. Waybrock didn't understand why they wanted to be apprentices. Talum noticed something behind his back. It was a monster crystal. He told Ellie they needed to use that. They thought Waybrock might be doubting their skills, so they wanted to show their skills to him. Ellie didn't understand what they would make now. Talum smiled and said it was the thing she was holding. He was talking about an arrow. He wanted to make one for her, and that would be the best so far. She didn't understand why an arrow. They wanted to make one arrow that's far better than ever before. They started beating the crystal with a hammer over the metal. They were successful in making an arrow. It was amazing and they made it faster than ever. Compared to weight, it was a little lighter than what Baron Amanta gave her. Talum was feeling proud as his savior was praising his work. Even Waybrock didn't believe that they made it so fast. They had no problem touching the monster ore as well, Jarrett said. Jarrett remembered the story of a clan that used to make swords for the imperial family long ago. He had doubts that the Crowman may belong to that clan. Ellie and Talum were hopeful that Waybrock might accept him now. She asked Waybrock whether he would accept him or not. Waybrock appreciated his work and talent. Waybrock and Sir Jarrett looked at each other and called Miss Ellie. Sir Jarrett wanted them to work there with Waybrock, so he asked Ellie to approach them about it. He wanted more people to work there to prepare swords faster and know how to forge weaponry. Sir Jarrett agreed to help them out, but he wanted them to help Waybrock as well. She smirked as this was her plan from the start. She wanted them to work there with Waybrock. She made it look hard. She acted like maybe they didn't want to work with Waybrock. They only wanted his apprenticeship. She still asked them. The Crowmen were worried about whether their master liked their weapon or not. They were concerned about it. She talked with them. Their master liked their weapon, but still, one thing remained. She told them to watch her facial expressions and maintain it. She told them to snort through their nose, and it would be better if he rejected it. He said it directly, no way, never, in an attitude manner. Sir Jarrett and Waybrock couldn't understand their language, which was beneficial as this would put an impact on them that they are negotiating. But communication is impossible without Ellie as well. She wanted to take the claim from this. From her point of view, nothing comes free after all. It was evening, everyone was clapping. Jarrett seemed to be pleased. He was happy because it would eventually make Baron Amanta happy. He hadn't made any breakthrough since, but Baron might be happy after how things turned out to be. Baroness Amanta was happy for her son as well. Baron Amanta knew how hard Sir Jarrett was working there. Sir Jarrett always looked forward to impressing his father. It was strange, but things turned out easy ever since Ellie came to Manson. Mother pointed out something. That's the reason why Sir Jarrett recommended her to learn more about trade and business. Sir Jarrett was blushing, but he wanted to work with Ellie more. He wouldn't have talked with Talum earlier if Ellie was not there. She did help them a lot, and Sir Jarrett praised her for her talent. After the completion of her education, Ellie maybe she'll make an excellent merchant. He wanted to speak more about Ellie just like Baron Amanta. Ellie was so talented, wherever she goes she will be loved. Definitely, Baroness Amanta said. Even if people continue to call her daughter of a thief, Jarrett didn't want Ellie to get hurt more. He asked his mother to talk about Ellie's abilities to talk with shapeshifters. Those abilities are rare. If Baron Amanta knows about that, then he would. And Baroness Amanta stopped him. She told him to not to think about it. He asked why. She told him that she may have special abilities, but all the mystical tree tribe died in war. And there was one possibility that she may have such ability because she has imperial blood. Jarrett was angry that how could her mother say something like this regarding Ellie. Ellie may seem to be of imperial blood, but they were not sure about that too. It was never revealed what exactly her mother stole from the palace. They thought her mother actually stole a child rather than jewelry from the imperial palace. Empress Carthia will do anything to make her child as new king, the crown prince. They wanted to keep it a secret about Ellie's abilities not to be revealed. Jarrett agreed to that. Ellie was not able to sleep at night due to what happened with her that day. She was wondering how she can enter the market as Sir Jarrett recommended her to learn more about trade. It was time for her to put her ideas out to the market. She was thinking that if the product came out good enough, then she can ask for profit as well. She has to choose a product that's not common and competitive. Damien was fast asleep, so sneaked out of there. She was feeling cold and walking with a lamp. The lights were off, and she seemed to be spooky. She thought maybe a ghost would come out there. She saw something, though it's a ghost. It would be cool to meet a ghost while working on her new plan. Duke Schuetz and Auntie were standing there. She didn't understand what they were doing late at night. Auntie apologized and raised his sword to attack on his grace. She didn't understand what was going on there. Blood dripped off. Why Auntie stabbed his grace. Auntie noticed that Miss Ellie was there. He asked what she was doing there. She was worried about why he had attacked his grace. Auntie explained that he and his grace were training, but Ellie didn't seem to believe it. She raised her hands and said she might be a child, but she knew something was wrong. She was trying to protect his grace. Auntie was worried that she was standing close to his grace and called her to his side rather than his grace's side. She looked back at his grace. His eyes were all red. He seemed like a different person. She understood that Duke Schuetz was mad. It was his madness in his eyes. She noticed that he was hurt all over his body as she stood close to him. It was a curse that required him to see blood to calm down his madness. But she didn't understand why he hadn't attacked Auntie if he was already mad. She grabbed his hands. His hands were bleeding. He calmed down a bit. He asked Ellie what she was doing there. She was concerned about his grace. His grace thought she was afraid because she was worried about him. She told him that she wasn't afraid of anything. She knew that if he wanted to kill her, he would have already done it to someone else due to his lost mind. She didn't sense any fear from his grace and just smiled. He looked at her with calm eyes. His wounds were slowly closing. It wasn't a healing power or magic. Ellie was calm and didn't fear the sight of so much blood, which his grace noticed. His grace asked how many times she had seen blood. At that time, Ellie wasn't actually acting like a child. She came up with a story about her aunt. How back when she used to live on the streets, her aunt always got injured whenever she met them. That was the reason it may not bother her. His grace ordered her to go back inside and forget what she saw. She shouldn't have seen him in that situation, he said. Auntie requested that she follow him until they reached her room. She was still concerned about his grace. She asked if he wasn't going to sleep. His grace used to have nightmares, which were the problem causing him not to get enough sleep. She called his grace and asked if she could help him to sleep. She explained how back in the orphanage, when Damien and Ellie held their hands before sleeping, they didn't have nightmares. She insisted that she stay by his side so he wouldn't have nightmares. She wanted his confirmation. She didn't know that he would actually agree to that. She came inside his grace's bedroom. As she was sitting at the corner of the bed, she saw his grace changing his clothes. She was baffled by his body and thought, would he actually change his clothes in front of a child? He saw her looking at him. She quickly turned her head away. She said she didn't see anything to his grace. He came to her and asked how she was going to put him to sleep. She assumed him to be an arrogant cat. She was glad that he was actually following her. She told him to lie down. He asked what she was doing. She covered him with a blanket. She told him that since his chest was always visible, it would be easier for him to sleep if he was warm. He just dismissed her words. She totally covered him with the blanket. He couldn't take it anymore and felt smothered. She turned him into a burrito. She was smiling because he didn't complain about anything. As his grace was thinking she was about to sing a lullaby for him, she insisted that she could if he wanted. But his grace didn't want to experience a nightmare. He asked if she didn't have bad dreams like other children. She had always been a sound sleeper. Her reality was more horrible than a dream. She realized that she needed to answer like a child and suddenly started talking about trash food and so much work. His grace asked about her mother's name. She was confused why he asked about her mother. She clenched her skirt. Talking about her mother had never ended well. Her mother's name was Shannon. She was worried that if Duke Schuetz hates her for being the daughter of a thief, he thought this was a ridiculous idea. She asked, which idea? She was horrible at putting people to sleep. He asked how she even managed to put children to sleep without them having any nightmares. But that never happened to any children. She told him to go to sleep. It was late at night as well. That was something a child shouldn't say to an adult. But Duke Shuitz was feeling sleepy. She yelled that it worked. She told him that it would definitely work. He taunted her, saying his body had decided to sleep rather than talk to her. She froze as she found it rude. He apologized to Ellie for what she saw that night and apologized for suspecting her all the time. By then, he went to sleep. She stood there, not understanding what he meant by that. He suddenly went to sleep. She was glad that she helped him sleep. She just forgot about the sentence and thought it may not mean anything. She found him ugly while sleeping. She said, "Sweet dreams," and closed the doors. Duke Shuitz went to sleep as well. In the morning, the bell rang. 3 women in white dresses gave blessings, saying that the sun and the world tree bestowed their blessings upon them. A woman with 4 children was standing in front of the 3 women. The women thanked the other 3 women for their blessings. The women were there to pass the blessing of God to the people. Whenever priests visit, kids get something to eat. Children were waiting for the food those women brought for them. It was Ellie in one of the cloths. That boy noticed it. Ellie was a priest. He called for Ellie. She went there, and he said, "It's Grace. It was good to see her again." When her hood was taken off, Grace noticed that it was not Ellie. The women got angry at Grace for what she was doing with the priest. She let go of her hand as she thought it was her friend Ellie. The priest didn't mind. She might look a lot similar to Ellie, she said. Grace told her that she belonged to a different family and it had been so long since she last saw her. Ellie has pretty green eyes just like the priest. She found it quite odd as no one in the territory had green eyes. Grace didn't understand how. She added that no one in the north has green eyes. She held Grace's hand and asked about her friend Ellie. They said safe travels and to come visit again next time. The girl hugged a small girl and gave her blessings. All work got done by the nuns. The sister felt disgusted after kissing an orphanage child's forehead. But she got information that there's a girl with green eyes same as her. She has tolerated everything because of her intentions. The other sister sitting next to her told her that her eyes were almost green that day. Ovli didn't understand what she meant. Her eyes looked orange due to the sunlight facing her directly. Ovli was feeling tired after blessing so many people. She asked her to wake up her when they reached the temple as she was about to go for sleep. The other nun agreed to that. Ovli slammed her hand on the table. She used the drink option to retain the green eyes, but it stopped working soon. As she drank the potion, her eyes went back to normal. The ball was buzzing. A voice came from the ball that it's still about the old trick yet. It was her father. She found a way to get closer to Duke Shuitz. His father thought maybe the Kleider boy he heard the news about was how Duke Shuitz found him. She couldn't believe that they've found a boy. It was expensive to send her to the temple just because she said she would find the boy on her own. He called her daughter a fool. She felt guilty, but her father advised her to find a better way. He reminded her that if it wasn't for wench Yuria, then she would have been the one who had married Duke Shuitz. He wanted to get free from being the Empire's lapdogs. She never thought of being part of Shuitz's family as her father wanted first, but now she wants to be part of it too. She was ready to do anything to be Duke's side, even if she has to marry Damien. Duke Shuitz warned a girl about the monster over the place. If she didn't want to end up her life, she must be careful. It was a backstory of her and Duke Shuitz. She thought as they both were lonely, they could be a perfect match for each other. The call got disconnected after her father ordered her to report back to him. Ellie made a new hairstyle for Damien and showed him the mirror to look at himself in it. It was kind of awkward, but Ellie found it cute. Ovli was ready to do anything just to take her place. Ellie fired an arrow, and her maids cheered her on, saying she was the best. She shot another arrow which hit the bullseye again. The maids praised her once more. They were so impressed that they started tossing her in the air in celebration. All 3 maids were happy for her. Then she saw Sir Raynor there. Everyone present was a hardcore fan of hers. His Grace watched them from his room as they cheered for Ellie. France informed him about how they had busted the gang of thieves. They were also able to discover their hideout when they interrogated the thieves who were related to wanted criminals. France noticed that his Grace was watching Miss Ellie and her servant playing in the garden. Ellie was shooting arrows upside down and showing off her skills while everyone cheered for her, including Sir Raynor. Ellie thoroughly enjoyed archery. His Grace smiled and said that she did like it after all. He handed her an arrow to shoot and expressed his desire to watch her shoot arrows. He walked out, and France was shocked. He kept calling for his Grace, but he didn't stop. France, being old, was breathing heavily. His Grace asked Raynor why he was carrying Ellie. Ellie was feeling tired, so Raynor was helping her back inside. Ellie greeted his Grace as well. His Grace was concerned if she was hurt or not. She was not hurt but wanted to rest before her arms started hurting again. His Grace understood but didn't say anything. He asked Rainer about his son. Rainer said he has 3 sons. Suddenly, His Grace lifted Ellie and showed Sir Rainer how to hold a child in a more comfortable manner. She was not uncomfortable when Sir Rainer held her. Everyone was amazed at such a response from His Grace. His Grace asked if she agreed with him or not as well. She couldn't just admit it there as she was feeling shy. He noticed her bow. She told him that it was given to her by Lord Amanta. It was much better than any other bow she had used before. His Grace asked France about the bow he wanted to gift Ellie. France didn't have any answer regarding that. She understood that earlier when France brought something for her, it was the bow he wanted to gift her. She told him that the bow she got from His Grace was the best of all. His Grace was happy that she liked it. She appreciated his taste but got upset that she was being called a child. However, France was happy that Miss Ellie had actually saved him. She didn't want to get more emotional, but for her own good, she wanted to be by His Grace's side. His Grace expressed concern regarding her diet as she looked skinny to him. She didn't understand how he felt that way as she was gaining more weight. His Grace rushed her to the dining table, thinking she would remain skinny if she kept skipping meals. Everyone standing there was shocked. He fed her while still holding her in his arms. He thought maybe she was not able to finish her meals, and that's why she was skinny. But Ellie had eaten a lot. He asked where she wanted to go next. She was surprised that he would take her there. He taunted her, saying that she thought he was her professional coachman. She didn't understand how his words didn't match his actions since he was the one who asked her where she wanted to go. She told him to take her to Damien's training room where the knights were sparring. His Grace thought she wanted to learn about swords since she was able to shoot arrows. The training was intense, which was hard for Ellie. He didn't understand why she had brought him there. Damien called for Ellie then. She got off his arms and rushed towards Damien, saying she had promised to watch him during his training. Damien was happy to see her there. She asked him if he had eaten anything. He wanted to finish his training so he could eat with Ellie, but she had already eaten before she came there. He asked with whom. It was His Grace with whom she had lunch. His Grace was standing there with folded hands. He noticed Aura. He saw Damien with rage in his eyes. Damien looked at him like a cat about to attack. He was just a smiling child in front of Duke Schuitz. Even if Duke Schuitz helped him, he would still feel envy towards Duke Schuitz. He wanted Ellie to eat with him since he had trained hard. Ellie consoled him, saying they would eat together. Duke Schuitz said who would sit and eat with him, so he suggested they all eat together. This was a good chance for Damien to get closer to Duke Schuitz. But Damien seemed off, though he agreed as Ellie wanted to eat with him, so he would as well. His Grace found Damien's reaction cute, and Ellie was about to eat lunch again with Damien. But instead, they would eat dinner together rather than lunch. It was a delicious dinner. Damien offered some food, as did His Grace, for Ellie. Ellie did not like it as they both were approaching her to eat something. They asked how she liked it. It was her 10th plate, and she was holding food in her mouth. Ellie wanted them both to eat as well. Ellie and Lady Amanta were sitting for tea. Ellie explained to her what had happened with Damien and His Grace. Lady Amanta understood that she was receiving lots of love from both of them. Ellie thought it was not love, but His Grace was enjoying teasing her. Lady Amanta smiled at her words. Ellie was concerned about her weight because she had eaten too much the previous night due to His Grace and Damien. Lady Amanta didn't find her that chubby. Suddenly, Lady Amanta started coughing. Ellie got worried and asked if she needed help. Lady Amanta assured her it was just a tickle and asked Ellie if she could go inside. She was fine. Nothing serious had happened. She just wanted to be in her room to feel better. Ellie did a great job, and Lady Amanta advised her to give a gift to His Grace. Ellie was worried that His Grace might not like her gift. She remembered how last time she gave him a gift, he didn't seem to react much. Lady Amanta told her that His Grace was not good at expressing his emotions to people. She suggested that Ellie should give him something that she had made herself. He would surely appreciate it. Ellie agreed that she would make something, and Lady Amanta offered her help. Ellie was unsure if it was a good idea to give him something. Her face turned pale. His Grace noticed her standing there beside them. Auntie arrived and greeted her good day. Ellie quickly hid the gift she had brought for His Grace. Auntie informed her that they were going for a patrol around the duchy, so they would not be in the castle for a few days. The Black Lions would go with Duke Schuitz. Auntie advised her not to cause any trouble for the others. Ellie agreed that she would behave, especially since Lady Amanta and Sir Jarrett would also be there with her. His Grace noticed that she had grown close to the others. Auntie noticed something about His Grace. Ellie acted as if Sir Jarrett was her guardian now, which was natural considering the Amanta family was about to adopt Ellie. His Grace remembered about the adoption. A man arrived and asked His Grace if they should leave now for the patrol. Ellie was about to lose her chance to give the gift to Schuitz. Hastily, she called to His Grace and said, "Here, take this gift from me." It was a knotted tassel she had made with Lady Amanta's help. His Grace couldn't believe that she had made it. She explained that she made it to keep him safe. She felt a bit embarrassed and quickly added that if he didn't want to take it with him, he could just leave it there. His Grace took her gift and hung it on his body armor. He told her that he would keep it to tease her for the rest of her life. She was stunned that he called her work shabby. He patted her head and said it was actually very nice, it was just a joke. His Grace really liked her gift. He and his associates left for the patrol around the duchy. She was relieved that he praised her for something she had made for him. A few days passed, and Ellie was holding a sword. It was the latest creation by Lord Amanta's son. She wanted Damien to hold the sword as well, so she asked Sir Jared if Damien could try it too. Damien held the sword in his hand. It was a pretty good sword, not too heavy or too big for him. Damien started swinging the sword around, and it was lighter than he expected. Ellie was happy that he liked it. By that time, Talum and Waybrock arrived as well. They were curious as Ellie was there to see the newly crafted sword. Waybrock looked much healthier than before. Talum asked her who the boy standing next to her was. She introduced Damien to both Talum and Waybrock. She also introduced Talum to Damien, explaining that Talum was helping Waybrock with his words. Damien still had issues with other people, but Talum found Damien cute and nice. Talum wondered how old Damien was, so Ellie replied that he was about to turn 12 years old. Talum smiled to himself about something. Ellie then asked them both if they would come with her, as Lord Amanta had given permission to Sir Jarrett for market visits and market analysis. Talum had to decline the offer as his master needed his help to forge another sword. Talum and his master were working on another sword. She didn't understand what they were making. Talum leaned towards Damien and smiled. Damien didn't understand why he smiled. Ellie and Damien went to the market. They were eating something. She didn't understand why Talum was acting a bit strange. Maybe he was inspired by Damien's eyes, which were like blue gems. As they were in the market, she decided to focus on finding new ideas and exploring places she hadn't been able to explore last time. She felt something, turned around, and felt like someone was watching her. She thought maybe it was a band of thieves, but they shouldn't be here anymore since Sir Raynor had captured their entire gang. She held Damien's hand tightly and went to find Sir Jarrett, just in case, or to return to the carriage. She smelled something strange, something rotten. Suddenly, someone grabbed her hand, and Damien and Ellie were forcibly separated. Ellie called for Damien, and Damien called for Ellie. Meanwhile, in the battlefield, His Grace and his associates were fighting. The priest was unable to purify one of them. They were able to move at that rate because Baron Amanta had taken care of the encampment. Auntie noticed that His Grace was smiling. He was touching the gift Ellie had given him. He asked Auntie what it meant to be family. Auntie didn't understand what he was talking about, and while speaking, he also talked to His Grace. Even Auntie had the answer to the question His Grace asked him. Since he didn't have any answer, he thought parents would do anything for their child and the child would develop trust and grow more. He understood what Auntie meant. Meanwhile, the other night fighting said to think about Baron Amanta, his wife, and Sir Jarrett. They considered Ellie as their own, and that's what a family is. He understood that the Baron considered her a daughter. Auntie got scared. The knight apologized for a slip of the tongue. He said the Baron was not young, so he saw her as a granddaughter, not a daughter. Auntie and the other knight were shocked when the Duke said why people didn't consider him as well, as he would do anything for them too. He wanted to finish the work and wanted to go back quickly. Once they returned, His Grace would ask about the things they learned. A shell came there and helped Miss Ellie from that man's hands. She inspected if Ellie was okay or not. Ellie was surprised but fine after all. The other maid was holding the guy on the ground. Damien was worried about Ellie too, but she was fine and smiling. As she raised her hands, there was blood on them. Damien was scared. Michelle said that once Sir Jarrett arrived there, she would hand him over to Sir Jarrett and he would face the consequences when His Grace arrived. She also noticed some smell there. The man apologized, saying he was worried about his daughter running away just like his wife did. When his daughter left home, his wife told him that his daughter had blonde hair and green eyes. They all noticed that the man was telling the truth. He did have blonde hair and green eyes, just like Ellie. Sir Jarrett arrived there and asked what happened. Ellie was thinking maybe she was the daughter of that man. Her mother never talked about her father. She always thought her father would be just like her, a homeless man wandering around the streets. But if he was really her father, why didn't he come earlier for her? It was Sister Ovely who arrived there, and His Grace too. His Grace noticed Ellie over there and asked her what she was doing with that man. She wanted to ask the same to His Grace. Sister came there and said she could explain if Ellie wanted. Sister introduced herself and introduced Ellie to her. She told Ellie that she lives on a street and cures pain. The man who held her hand also belonged to such pain. The man started running away suddenly, saying he had found his daughter. Sister and his grace followed him just in case to catch him. Sir Jared didn't understand how that justified his actions. There was no proof that Ellie was his daughter, even though there was no evidence of him being her father. He was just trying to find his child. Damien was angry and told Sister that what made her the judge to decide what was right and wrong. Only Ellie had the right to decide because she was the one who got hurt. Damien looked furious at Sister. The sister got worried. Damien had mistaken her. She was the priest Damien had asked. She should be more concerned about the person who got hurt. He was protecting her and she liked it. He had changed a lot ever since that day. Thanks to Damien, she was not shaken there. She should think carefully about the situation that occurred there. There was no evidence that the man was her father, so all she could do was believe in her feelings. Damien was worried about Ellie. Sister apologized to Ellie for not going for her at first. Sister Ovely saw her wounds and started treating them. Sister Ovely was able to heal with the power of the divine. She used holy water to heal Ellie. But according to Ellie, every priest used to heal nobles. So why didn't she? Damien questioned if the water was holy or not. The bottle got dropped, and he noticed that the rotten smell was coming from her. Sister Ovely was mad at Damien because of his claims. She was thinking what he was implying about her. How dare he make that claim without knowing anything? She recognized that his eyes were familiar. She had seen them before as well. She remembered back in time when she went to buy a potion for her eyes and hair. She saw him trapped in a cage. At that time, she didn't recognize him. He was a test subject from the apothecary. She clearly had no idea he was the son of Duke Clyder. She could have helped him at that time, but instead, she ignored him and left. She understood how he knew that it wasn't holy water, but he wouldn't be able to prove it. Damien pointed out some mistakes and how it wouldn't be holy water. There was no way she would let Damien ruin her day. His grace stepped in. He was not pleased with the tone Damien used to speak to the priest. According to him, priests like them help orphans. But Damien hadn't said anything wrong. He spoke the truth. Ellie had enough of them arguing with each other. Damien just stopped speaking. He was sad, and so was Ellie because Ellie knew Damien would not make any claims without reason. But she was also a priest from the temple, and the temple and the emperor were close allies. But if that wasn't holy water, then what was in the broken bottle and why did she give it to her? The man apologized, saying it was all his fault. He was so sure that it was his daughter standing there. Ashel got angry because of his reckless claims over her. She asked what his wife's name was or where the last time he met his wife. The man had no idea how he met his wife or where, as he always lived on the road, so he didn't know her real name either. Ellie knew that people who live on the road change their names multiple times. Also, her mother was a fugitive, so it was common for her mother to change her name according to the situation. The description from that man matched her mother, but still, something was missing. Now that man had no clue if he was her father. Ashel advised her to go home and not give more attention to this man's delusions. She was worried about Ellie as well. Sister Ovely said that children and their parents are brought to the world through God's will. As she was God's representative, she was ready to confirm their relationship with the help of holy water. Sir Jared didn't understand how that was even possible, as every human is born with mana. And mana is connected to bloodlines. So if they dropped a blood drop into holy water, they'd be able to measure mana. Ellie did not have any extra holy water at that time, so she had to ask the temple for the holy water. Damien didn't seem happy with Sister Ovely. Sister Ovely asked Ellie whether she wanted to find her family or not before beginning the ritual. Once they finished, they would be able to understand whether the man was her father or not. Sister Ovely hoped Ellie didn't want to find her parents because she might not want to leave the noble family. She thought maybe Ellie avoided the question and appeared like a heartless person. She played a trick with her, saying that maybe Duke also wanted to find her family as well. She played this trick so that Ellie couldn't resist the offer Sister offered her. Ellie understood her trick, as nobody there knew Ellie belonged to the noble family, so how did the priest know she was living with Duke's family? The priest must have had some kind of motive regarding that. That was the reason she approached her. Ellie didn't understand how she knew she was living with Duke's family. She came there actually took Sir Jared's carriage, neither the noble family's carriage. Duke Schuetz and the temple did not have a good relationship, as the temple used to meddle in House Schuetz's family affairs. And all of a sudden, a child wanted to help another child find her parents who was under Duke's protection. She talked about his Grace's illness to her. She didn't know why, but maybe because the priest stopped visiting him. She asked if it was possible for her to give her some holy water so that she could treat Duke's illness. She requested her. Sister Ovely was stunned. She wanted to repay Duke Shuitz, but she didn't know how to, so she asked for holy water. Sister was annoyed that she was about to make her and the man undergo a paternity test, but she somehow managed to turn the tables. With a hopeless face, she asked if it was too hard a request. She said to her. Eshelle was stunned too. Everyone felt bad for Miss Ellie. She smiled that she was able to dodge her test and turn the tables in her favor. It was night and dark. Ellie had to keep a bandage on her wrist. A doctor was there for Ellie. The pain was not that much as she had gotten used to it. She was glad how everything had worked out for her. Sister Ovely said she would bring the holy water after a few days. But His Grace was not happy with Sister's treatment. He didn't like how Damien had talked to her. She wanted to talk with His Grace and resolve the issues as soon as possible. The maids were feeling guilty and were ready to be punished by Ellie. It was just an action they had done, nothing was wrong. She started waving her hand to show that she was doing great. Roina was concerned about her health because she was injured. She insisted that no matter how much she was hurt, Ellie should always tell her. Her maids were really depressed by the incidents that happened that day. They were really worried about her, like Baroness Amanta. Ellie felt like if she was the daughter of a thief, she was just a temporary replacement of the lead female. She would be gone sooner, but she would miss all those who cared about her. She just didn't want to get emotional at that time. She told Roina about what had happened that day. Roina was shocked to hear she didn't believe the father thing. She said she had no idea if he was her father, and the priest would come back in 4 days to confirm and take a test. Roina didn't understand what they should do. Roina knew that something like this would happen when both Baron and His Grace were away. Also, she did not have any legal guardianship yet, so she could not resist her approach as well. Roina wrote a letter to His Grace and advised Ellie not to worry about this anymore. Ellie was relieved that Roina was there to help her. Even Roina was pleased as well. Roina took everyone outside as Ellie needed some rest. Roina wanted Ellie to take complete rest and not be disturbed. Ellie asked Damien if he was tired and suggested they could go to bed. But Damien was not tired. He was concerned. He was still thinking about what had happened earlier. She consoled him not to be scared and assured him that those kinds of things wouldn't happen again. But Damien was feeling guilty. He thought it was his fault that she got injured because he had loosened her hand. She didn't feel good either because it was not his fault after all. Seeing him feel guilty made Ellie sad as well. Damien couldn't have done anything to prevent what had happened earlier. She imagined the situation where he got hurt, and if she felt sorry about that, how would he feel then? Damien got scared again. He understood that it was not his fault. She didn't want him to blame himself. That would upset His Grace as well. But him being sad made Ellie even sadder. Everything that had happened was not his fault. He should not blame himself for anything. But interestingly, none of these things actually happened in the original story. As Ellie was there, that was the reason how things had been going around. She had to fix everything. To make Damien happy, she said she might want to eat hot cocoa. She asked him if he could sneak out and bring her a cup of cocoa because since she had been having sweets a lot, they wouldn't let her have cocoa. Damien ran from there to bring cocoa for Ellie. Ellie was concerned about the young priest. The priest knew who she was. Ellie was wondering if they knew about her mom as well. She wrote something on the paper, but if the young priest knew about her, then the emperor would have known about it, and he wouldn't be silent. Since nothing had happened, it was easy to understand that the emperor did not know about her. She wanted to know how much the temple knew about her, so she tried a trick to get some information. She stamped the envelope, but there was no way that she could send that envelope with a noble tag on it. Damien arrived there by then with cocoa. No servant saw him coming there with cocoa. She appreciated his efforts for her. She enjoyed the hot cocoa. Damien liked that Ellie was happy with the cocoa. Ellie gave some cocoa to Damien as well. A carriage arrived. The priest was at the palace for the first time ever since she left for the temple. She was determined to get the palace back to her. Let's see that in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.